Good day, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable discussion of the Many Ways to Zero Waste campaign. I'm Zach Hughes, and I'll be your moderator for today. Today, we're going to be talking about plastic pollution. We all know it's a very big problem. I'm certainly guilty of using and throwing away plastics, wantonly. And I think that with the collective usage of plastics in the Philippines, it's especially a big problem for Filipinos all over the country. And so we want to know how do we address this long-term problem with both short-term and long-term solutions, especially in our sachet economy. Filipinos are so used to affordability and convenience. Can we wean ourselves off single-use plastics, especially small single-use plastics that we just throw away? The Many Ways to Zero Waste campaign of Rappler was created in response to one of the world's biggest environmental problems, which is plastic waste. Did you know that the Philippines is one of the largest contributors to ocean plastics in the world? As a developing country with a sachet economy, the campaign was started in 2019 in order to bring a practical solution at the grassroots level. So today, I'm joined by professionals and experts who would love to talk to us about these solutions and what we can all do, each and every one of us. So I'd like to introduce all four of them. First of all, I'm joined by Crispian Lau, Vice Chairman of the National Solid Waste Management Commission. Hello, Chris. Welcome.
Hi, nice to be here. I'm currently the Vice Chair of the National Solid Waste Management Commission. I represent the private sector, recycling industry sector, one of the 17 members of the Commission.
Thank you very much. Also joining me today is Kais Marzuki, Nestle Philippines Chairman and CEO. Welcome, Kais.
Thank you, Zach. Hello, I'm Kais. I've been heading up Nestle Philippines for the last 2 years. And as the biggest food and beverage company in the world and in the Philippines, we also want to take a leadership role when it comes to waste management.
Right. Thank you very much. And also joining us is Professor Tonette Tanchuling, Director of the Institute of Civil Engineering at UP Diliman. Welcome, Tonette.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm a professor. Aside from civil engineering, I'm also a professor at the Environmental Engineering Program of UP, and I teach solid waste management and also do research on it. Right now, we're doing research on microplastics.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And last but not the least is also a good friend, Joel Palma, the Executive Director of the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Hello, Joel.
Hi, magandang hapon. Joel Palma, Executive Director. Probably you're thinking why the pandas are working right now with plastics or waste. No? At the end of the day, this problem has affected nature, wildlife, and our natural resources. So that's why we are helping to save and solve this problem. As we speak, we have a new program globally that's actually on no plastics in nature, and not just in the oceans, but in nature in general. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joel. And again, welcome to all our panelists today. I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion. Back in March 2019, an audit in the Philippines revealed that every day, almost 48 million shopping bags are used throughout the Philippines, which adds up to more than 17 billion bags a year. And needless to say, we are a major contributor to marine plastic pollution. In major cities, new ordinances are being introduced to ban single-use plastics in malls and groceries. But is this enough to stem the tide? And will we finally wean ourselves off single-use plastic and other plastic pollution, plastic waste? So this is my main question to all our panelists, and I hope you can answer that as we go on to discussion. But let's start off with learning about what is our current situation. And so this first question goes to Professor Tonette. Where are we in terms of plastic recycling technology in the Philippines? What are the challenges, of course, and what are maybe the past successes that we've had?
Yes, the overall plastic recycling rate is estimated to be, it's quite low. It's estimated to be 9% only. There are only 3 plastic types that are being recycled right now. That's the clear PET bottles, the PET. So we estimate that to be a 24% recycling rate. And then the rigid HDPE, which is at 31% recycling rate, and the polypropylene, 19%. So these are the plastics that we use for takeout food, in fast food usually. So the infrastructure for collecting and consolidating recyclables is only found in the highly urbanized centers. So that's the challenge. There is hardly any collection being done in remote areas like mountainous areas and in islands. So recycling also requires segregation. That's a key component of recycling, which we can do in MRFs. But in terms of number of material recovery facilities, we also lack those. So we only have around 33% which can service our, only 33% of our barangays can be serviced by MRFs. Yeah. But in terms of successes, so what are the challenges? We cannot recycle yet laminates. These are the sachets. The single-use carrier bags. So these are the ones that are difficult to collect. The flimsy plastics, the film plastics. Usually they are contaminated, so they're barely recycled. So the successes, maybe there are now efforts here and there to process these plastic waste, but not in the scale that we want to see. Yeah, that's it.
And that of course is, I think, a goal that we all need to work for, or maybe reduce in terms of usage, reduce the number of those small plastics that can't be recycled,
Yes.
or very difficult to be recycled. Yeah, but the Philippines is, I mean, as far as I understand, the Philippines has numerous laws on recycling and on solid waste management. For Chris Lau, what do you think is missing? I mean, are these laws strictly being implemented by LGUs, or is it a case of good laws, bad implementation?
Well, you hit it in the nail, no? It's basically we have one of the best and most comprehensive law in RA 9003, or the Ecological Solid Waste Management law, and it was enacted in 2000. It calls for mandatory segregation at source. It mandates that every citizen should segregate their waste from the source. So how many of us actually segregate? It mandates that the barangays should have material recovery facilities to deal with the biodegradable and the recyclable waste. No? But reality is, still a lot of our biodegradables go to the garbage trucks, no? Because of the lack of infrastructure. And if you look at the real problem, and then when you go to collection, the law mandates that there should be a separate collection. And the city is supposed to collect only the residual waste. But again, because of the scarce resources of the local government units, more often than not, it is a single collection system. There are LGUs that separate the collection of bio from residual, or nabubulok or di nabubulok, no? And that actually helps in segregating. And because segregation actually decontaminates the waste, so that you get the maximum resource potential of the waste, instead of just putting it in a landfill. Lastly, the local government is supposed to dispose of the waste in sanitary landfills. But again, there's lack of sanitary landfill as disposal facilities in the country. Only around 18.75% of our population has access to sanitary landfills, serving about 30+% local government units. So yes, if you look at it, it's a beautiful law, but unfortunately, with the local government units supposed to be on top of this, what is really lacking is really the fund allocation by the local government unit, which leads to a lack of infrastructure. So again, those are the real challenges as far as waste management is concerned.
And it's interesting that you pointed out, the lack of certain infrastructure, but also connecting to what Dr. Tonet said about the statistics that we've had in terms of our recycling rate. Do you think there's any, maybe for both of you, do you think there's any data that we still need to gather, or the numbers that don't add up when it comes to recycling? Maybe the attitudes toward recycling is there, but we just don't have enough information on how many Filipinos are actually following that law.
Well, the data that I'm interested in the numbers that Tonet came out with, no? Because there was an earlier study by JICA, but that was way back in 2006. No?
Mhm.
With reference to recycling rates being that low, yeah, it's something that we need to look into. And we need to see, definitely if it's only really at 9%, there are definitely opportunities where you can improve recycling in the Philippines, where you can enhance this. Yeah, it would be nice to look into those numbers and see what we can do as government to encourage more investments in this field. And again, investments in recycling would not only account for the facilities. You have to invest also on the infrastructure so this gets collected. Then you go back to segregated collection. Segregation is key so that you don't contaminate the recyclable material, so you get the best value out of that. So these are the things for me, I would want to look at it as a potential that we can explore.
Thank you. Dr. Tonet, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of the data that we need?
Yes, because first we'll be happy to share the results of our study and the details. That's actually a WWF study. So the report is going to be released very soon. So in terms of data, we need more data regarding the activities of the junk shops
Mhm.
to get the real numbers. Some of them are undocumented also.
Mm.
So we need validation of the data.
I'm sure,
But
yeah, I'm sure it's very difficult to measure, all of the things that are being recycled. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, but I was going to say that it's about the stat of available data that is there. So after the JICA study, this is the first time that something of this kind of study will be released. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about the other side of the picture, in that the plastics have to come from somewhere, and usually they're coming from the products that we consume, or from industry that consumes them or that produces them. I'd like to ask this next question to Kais. What is how should businesses, and especially other organizations, even the private sector, the academe, and government, approach this plastic crisis, keeping in mind that everyone has a part to play in addressing this problem?
Absolutely, absolutely. As it has been described now, it's really a very complex issue. And plastic waste management needs to be really managed better in a different way going forward if we want to have a better future for our next generation. So at Nestle, we have laid out our vision that we want to have a waste-free future, that we want that none of our products, which consume packaging and therefore plastic, none of that plastic will end up in landfill or in the oceans. And we try to really work out ways to get there. It's definitely not an easy journey, and it's a long journey, but we're confident that eventually we'll get there. So we have really defined three main focus areas, if I may. So the first one is really developing the packaging of the future. How can we move away from the plastic laminates that Dr. Toret mentioned? Most of these sachets are not recyclable because they have many different materials on them to preserve food and products, and longevity and hygiene and be safe for consumers. At the same time, there is no recycling facility at scale that would enable them to be recycled today. So how do we manage that? What kind of packaging can we move to in the future? So we have a whole research center in Switzerland working on that. I think many companies around the world are trying to find what is the next frontier. How can we move away from plastic? But we know that plastic is very, very cheap. So therefore, it makes our products affordable. It's really safe. It gives a good barrier of protection against humidity, against bacteria. So it is really something that everybody relies on, and it's an essential part of the lives we live and the way we consume. But to give an example, one thing we have done already is we have committed to move here in the Philippines as Nestle from plastic straws to paper straws. So we consume around 600 million straws a year through all our products, Shocky, Bear Brand, Sterilized, Nescafe, etc. So that's a big, big shift for us to move from plastic straws to paper straws, and we committed that we will do this and complete this by the end of this year. So I think this would be a good first step on that. So packaging is not only plastic, it can be also other things.
Yeah.
The second big thing we want to do is really helping to shape a waste-free future. And this is where we have also announced that we will be, from now on, plastic neutral. We went plastic neutral in August. And from now, every month onwards, we will retrieve the same amount of plastic we put out there through our products. We will retrieve post-consumers. So once it has been consumed, we will take back the same tonnage of plastic and we process through cement factories as part of co-processing. And the third focus area for us is really education, because many stakeholders are part of this problematic, and we want to make sure that, in general, consumers and all stakeholders are really informed and educated and can participate in that effort of waste management. We will roll out a whole module on waste management in 10,000 schools when school starts in October, hopefully.
Very good note. And I mean, just on the plastic straws point, I sometimes hesitate to buy the smaller packs of milk just because I know that I will never use the plastic straws, and that it's a conscious decision, but it's really challenging when you can't. There's no other option. You have to get small packs of milk. The plastic straws you don't need, you throw it away. What do you do? I think moving towards these kinds of nudges in behavior will really help, especially if, as you said, it's affordable, it's cheap to use. But maybe we can think of better alternatives to single-use plastics. So thank you very much, Kais, for that. I'd like to actually ask the other panelists what they think about the roles that NGOs and the academe and government can do, working together with businesses such as Nestle to reduce single-use plastics. Maybe, Joel, you have your thoughts on that?
I guess waste is one major issue in terms of sustainability. I'll just give some context. We only have one planet, and our consumption is already 1.7 planets. We decreased a bit because of COVID. We were not consuming as much. So and much of this consumption is waste. That's why we're looking into this. In terms also of plastics, you all know that plastics is made out of fossil fuel, and the more plastics that we use, it equates to climate change. So that's why we're here. At the end of the day, I think it's as Kais has also mentioned, it's very important to inform the people, to inform the publics that it's not just cheap, it's very safe. I totally agree, but at the same time, we have to all know the consequences so that not just the producers, government, and also the public should know that we should be, as you said, Zach, you're very conscious about what to buy and what not to buy, and I think this is where we're coming from, and as an NGO, we're quite in a position and lucky to, just like here, we're in one screen and not one group, but we have government here with vice chairman, the private sector, the academe, and also media. So it's very important that we all link in, because the change itself is so complex.
Thank you, Joel. Professor Tonet, do you have anything to add to that? Especially as what Kais mentioned, education is critical. So starting with the research that you're doing, how does that translate into actual, policy changes or, attitude changes on the level of the communities? Yeah.
Yes, the academe has a very important role. First, we should always provide the science and the evidence behind all the policies and all the programs that are being launched. Of course, we should always share what we know, with the other sectors, but with all sectors, the government especially, and of course the NGOs and the private corporations. And yes, we're in tertiary level. I'm teaching in the university, so even in the university, it would be very good if we incorporate, for example, solid waste management, and we have done. We have incorporated it in required subjects, like we have the NSTP. That's something that all college students take, so that we educate them. I mean, all students would be educated on that, and also we can do research on all the problems confronting the waste management value chain, like all the issues on collection, infrastructure, segregation, disposal, the design of landfills, and also developing alternative materials. And as I have said, whatever research we come up with, we should share to the public and to make it popular.
Maybe a question I can throw again to all of you is, what can individuals or smaller communities do to reduce, their plastic waste, or what can they do to think about, even, maybe if they can't reduce it immediately, think about the steps that they need to take to reduce plastic waste. And this connects to our next topic later on, which is talking about scaling up. But let's start first with the communities or with individuals. Maybe any of you would like to share your thoughts on that?
As individuals, we can start being conscious as consumers with the choices that we make. As you have pointed out, Zach, we ask ourselves every time we buy something, do we need that kind of packaging? So all those little things that it may seem little, but it adds up to something somehow. If everyone practices that can bring about change. And then we can also be more active in our communities, whatever programs, wherever we are, whichever communities those are, the barangay or even the institutions where we work for, let us be active in programs for waste minimization. We can also be vigilant and hold our leaders responsible for the mess that we are in today. For example, during elections, waste management should be an important campaign issue. And let's hold the local leaders accountable for those issues. So that's one of the ways I think we can contribute.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add on what individuals and communities can do?
Just maybe to give a couple of examples of things we have tried out in this direction. Now, how do we get communities interested? How do we give a value basically to waste?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we had a scheme with schools where through our Bear brand, milk brand, that kids will bring back plastic from consumption from home, not throw it away, but just collect it and bring it back. And then as much plastic as we gathered, we transformed that plastic into school benches and gave it then for free to the school. So how can we find a way to create this circular momentum, to get an interest for everybody to find value basically in plastic waste? Last year we started also a pilot with the city of Valenzuela, and we tried to give a value per kilogram of plastic waste, and then collected also in that way plastic waste, which gave us really a lot of learnings for us then to achieve plastic neutrality later this year. So I think it has to be grassroots experiments. I think there is no perfect theory. It has to be trial and error, and there has to be the commitment of the barangay or the LGU behind that to motivate and really get the community behind it. But we have to find ways to really get this circular economy going so that we get a value out of it.
Yes, great. Joel, you have anything to add?
Yes, I think we're talking about waste, and we have to manage our waste. And nowadays, we always say that cleanliness is health. We have to be very science-based, and we have to inform the people of the impacts. Studies have shown also that the fish that we eat already has microplastics. Aside from giving the positive side of management, but we also have to inform people what the impacts if we're not taking care of our waste. And I think that's very important when it's already affecting our very health, our well-being, and by then we will have a groundswell of people working together to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's to the next point on how do we now affect this change, at a larger scale. For Commissioner Lau, do you think, or for Vice Chairman Lau, sorry, do you think that the government could be doing more to address this micro waste and microplastics and plastic waste challenge, like what Kais was mentioning, incentivizing or putting value to waste, So that's not just implementing or following the law, but actually like really putting more value into the plastic that we use and that we throw away.
No single entity can do it alone. No, government cannot
Right.
do it alone.
Right.
There's too much pressure that's given to government. What we need to have is stakeholder collaboration. When you say stakeholder collaboration, that should include the government, the industry, civil society, the academic community, and more importantly, the citizenry. Without the participation of the citizenry in general, we're bound to fail. So again, stakeholder collaboration is very, very important. You have to develop sound and implementable policies from the government side. No? We've heard a lot of bannings that are being done at the local government unit, but the question is, what is the result of those bans? Some of those bans actually resulted into a bigger volume of waste that the local government unit needs to manage because what the replacements are actually not recyclable, and the replacement also needs to be thrown away. I'll give you an example right now. You see face masks being thrown all over the place. Uh, um, we banned plastics and plastics continue to litter. No? And now you have a different form of litter in the face mask. I think education, as mentioned by guys, is key. We need to educate our citizenry in proper management. And from what Joel has said, make them understand the risk of not doing it.
Mm.
And these are key elements that should be put on the ground. I think it's important and key that everybody puts their acts together. We need to have collaboration. There is an organization, and allow me to shift my hat, towards my role as the president of the Philippine Alliance for Recycling and Material Sustainability, which aims to bring together all stakeholders across the value chain and the waste chain. And the main objective is actually to develop a roadmap towards zero waste to nature, uh, and with an 2030 ambition. The whole idea of the program is to address the problematic materials. Plastics are number one, is now number one, and we are looking for what can be done with these plastics through redesign, reuse. Can we develop the infrastructure to recycle them, to collect and recycle? So banking on the 4R program of reduce, reuse, recover through collection and recycle, we want to develop a new infrastructure behind it so that none of this will end up in waste. And it's an ambitious target with a short term of 2022, mid-term of 2025 and 2030, that none of these materials will end up in nature.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That's a very good goal to work for. I want to throw it back to Kais. Is the business sector doing? How's Nestle and other companies moving towards this challenge?
So I think, as Chris mentioned, we need all stakeholders to work together. So for us to achieve plastic neutrality, for example, we have worked with cement companies for them to dispose of the plastic, with NGOs like the Plastic Exchange, and then now Pure Oceans, as we're developing also a way to get back from the islands. With 7,000 islands, we have to also find a way to get plastic back from the islands to bigger mainlands to really dispose of the plastic. So we're working with different entities, including the city of Valenzuela, as I mentioned. But at the end, we need all plastic manufacturers or manufacturers who use plastic like us to also come together and put all their efforts behind, like in palms, for example. What would be that roadmap? And what we are also preaching for is something called EPR, which is an extended producer responsibility scheme. Basically, everybody pays a fee. That money goes to an organization which is either governmental or private, and that organization will then manage, retrieve, recover, sort, upcycle, recycle, dispose of plastic in general, so that everybody participates in that same effort. I mean, the EPR schemes are in place in many countries around the world, and I think we believe it will be the right way to go also here in the Philippines.
It really is time for those kinds of schemes to come to the Philippines. I think it's long overdue. Joel, you did a study on EPR recently. Can you tell us more about this and how this applies to our context?
Well, why EPR? Because at the end of the day, the chain of this plastic waste is so long. So as much as possible, you start from the 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 source point rather than from the end point. So I think that's a very practical approach. We're very happy that Dr. Chuling and her group was basically the one who did the study. So, but I'll just give you some initial, and Dr. Chuling can give more details. But basically, based on the study, our geography is very complex, different islands and different scale, size, and also, as mentioned by Vice Chairman Chris, that you have different capacities. So it's in itself is a challenge on its own. In terms of the legal framework, I think although we have the Solid Waste Management Act, as mentioned also by our vice chair, that it's the basic, the fundamental framework, but has a lot of catching up to do in terms of implementation. And to be able to move on this, we need science, and we don't have much information at hand. So yes, Chris, I saw that. So that's very important because sorry to have this to have this sort of uh, term that trash in, trash out.
Mm.
So no good data, you won't get good results. And then as mentioned, that 9% only 9% are actually recycled. So that's why we really have to work together. It's actually not a one size fits all, but at the same time we need a very robust framework that would address the situation here in the Philippines, given the different capacities, given the different resources at hand, especially so that, correct me, Chris, if I'm wrong, that the Solid Waste Management Act is basically devolved at the LGU level. And if we're talking about the LGUs, we're talking about probably less than 2,000 LGUs at different capacities, no?
Mhm.
Uh, so that's where we're coming from, and at the same time, we're archipelagic. So the challenge is that's why we're third. We all know why we are third in terms of plastic waste in the ocean. So um, lots of things to do, but we're very glad that a lot of stakeholders down the chain are working. Of course, government, the private sector, the producers, and the academe are all working. And there are also a lot of NGOs who are starting to work similar to this. And we just have to put our heads together and resources together. Thank you.
I just wanted to take from what Joel and Kais was saying, that the academe here is like usually the starting point for driving this impetus of change, of doing not doing things as normal, because you're doing the baseline study. You said that the results will be released soon, but from what you're seeing, it doesn't look good, right?
Yes, there are a lot of challenges, a lot of things that we have to improve on. For example, we estimated, if we start with the collection efficiency, for example, our estimate is only on a national level, it's only at 40%. So that's one of our main findings, and if you are able to improve that, that would be a big thing already. So that's one of the findings in the study. So with the baseline study that we did, it's supported by data, by numbers, and then we will also see where we can prioritize the intervention as to uh, by being able to identify, for example, the plastics that are not being recycled, then so we know where we can focus, where are the geographically where are the areas where we can concentrate on. Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that the difficulty in the infrastructure in islands, for example, yeah, that makes it very complicated. Yeah, but it's not an impossible problem to solve.
Yeah, it's good that we can still be optimistic about this. Just a final few questions for Kais. Nestle is a very big company. It's a leader in the industry, and so if any move by Nestle will be seen as a signal in the right direction. I'm sure there's still challenges. You mentioned a few earlier. Just thinking about what could replace plastic. Are there any other challenges that you face as you try to reduce the plastic waste in the country?
One thing is trying to reduce plastic in general for us. I think that fits also, business objectives, because at the end of the day, plastic is money. So the less plastic, the less money. But often, replacing plastic with something else, like, I was giving the example of the plastic straws to paper straws, has a huge on-cost. So paper straws cost today 4 times the price of plastic straws. And consumers are not going to reward you for that choice today. Hopefully in the future they will. So I think as a business, it's always a big balancing act between, doing the right thing and at the same time trying to find the money to do the right thing. Because usually these new solutions, putting in place new systems, always come with certain investment. But I do believe it's going to be, first of all, it's part of the responsibility each business should take on. And second, I think eventually consumers will also reward the companies that have done the right thing. So if you really want to also be a force for good, then I think you have to invest. So how do we mobilize really all the different stakeholders to go into the same direction? I think that's a big effort and I think a challenge. And as Chris mentioned, we have farms, and also they're getting everybody aligned around the table is also sometimes not the easiest. Some have the same visions, and others are a bit reluctant to go and invest. Especially in a year now with COVID and so many impactors, it's a difficult choice also to make for each business to say now we're going to go and spend extra money for that. But I think we need to all move into this direction, because otherwise, maybe one day we won't have a business anymore.
True. I mean, if COVID has taught us anything, is that we can't really go back to the way things were. Otherwise, we end up in this unsustainable death spiral.
Absolutely.
If I can be creative about the term. I throw it back to Chris, to Commissioner Chris. You were challenging earlier that this has to be a multi-stakeholder, effort. What can the government now do? I mean, again, putting the government in the spotlight, but what can the government do to bring everyone to the table?
I think it would be more effective, in my opinion, to put an enabling environment so that private sector initiatives can come in. If we depend too much on government policies, then you have very good laws, you have problem with implementation. So we're back to where we started. No, how can we? How can we reshape things? There are already good practices, like Kais has mentioned. Nestle has been doing some things that are very good. Why don't we incentivize or allow them to continue to do what they're doing and entice others to do the same, so that everybody comes on board, everybody joins the bandwagon? What kind of incentives can the government give them so that, as Kai said, the cost to doing all of this becomes more reasonable? And again, putting a value to doing good, that is also critical for us. And again, with EPR as one of the possible avenues where we can get everybody, all the stakeholders, especially the producers, in the system, by providing financing in the system. We also need to understand how much the whole system would cost. And again, my question would be, how much would the companies be willing to pay? And how do you account for products that are in the market that are actually imported, and some of them are actually smuggled now? And EPR systems need to be designed for using the local setting, using the Philippine setting. We need to integrate, because one thing that's very important important to the Commission and to a country like the Philippines is integration, inclusion, social inclusion, which means that the informal sector that is dominated by the informal waste pickers needs to be integrated into the system. We would opt to do that rather than just take them away and put up a new system altogether. Again, Joel is very right. No one size fits all. An EPR system for the Philippines needs to be designed for the Philippines using the infrastructure and the resources available in the Philippines across the 7,641 islands that would service 42,000 barangays that would help 1,634 mayors. So
Yeah, no easy feat there, considering that everyone has different capacities in different contexts. But thank you very much for highlighting that there needs to be a contextualized, EPR framework for the Philippines. So I think at this point, we've all seen that what is possible if we all work together and we all contribute our parts. As a parting, any final words? We'd love to hear from you. Maybe you can also tell us what is your vision. What would you like to see happen in the Philippines and, of course, globally when it comes to plastic waste reduction? So who would like to start? Maybe let's start with Academe, as usual. Director, Dr. Tanet.
Maybe I'll touch on something that hasn't been mentioned earlier, but if we want to tackle plastic pollution and let's address the problem on sachets. Why do we have a sachet economy? It's because our people are poor. They cannot buy in bulk. So that's all they can afford. So to be able to address this problem, we should also address the problem of poverty. How do we really alleviate the poverty of the people so that they will be able to afford to buy things in bulk? So for me, that's a very important aspect to work on. I mean, we should not forget that, although we are working on waste management, but we should put it in context. And yeah, so of course for the vision, I'd like to see less of the plastic waste. As I've said, we are doing research on microplastics. It's when the bigger plastics are fragmented. Mostly we see secondary microplastics, meaning they come from the bigger plastics which have fragmented when we just throw them out, and so they get into smaller and smaller particles. But we also have the primary microplastics. Well, this is an altogether different issue, but these are what we see these are the microbeads we put in detergents, we put in facial washes. But in the issue more for the poorer countries, for the developing countries like ours, is the secondary microplastics as coming from the mismanaged plastic waste. So that's the vision. We should have less of this plastic waste, the mismanaged plastic waste.
Thank you. How about you, Kais?
So as I mentioned at the beginning, our vision is that none of our plastic ends up in landfill or in the ocean. So we are committed to taking a leadership role in this waste management topic. I think as we went around the table, we saw how complex it is. But I think if we all work together across academia, NGOs, government, industries, I'm sure that we can solve it. I think I read somewhere that 90% of all the plastic in the oceans comes from 10 rivers only in the world. So I think at the end of the day, if we really go after the big fish, and the big ticket items, I'm sure that we can really make a big impact, a positive impact, and improve the situation. So I'm very hopeful that we will get there.
Thank you. Chris, any words? I know you said a lot earlier, but in case you have anything else you want to add?
Again, we need to see more of our stakeholders working together. We need more involvement from our citizenry. Again, we need to collaborate. And I would like to think that together, it is possible. We can address this problem and leave a better environment for our future, for the future generations. And together, it's possible. We can do it together.
Great, thank you. And of course, not last but not least is Joel. Your thoughts on what needs to happen?
Before my thoughts, from Kais, he just said that there are 10 major rivers. One of those rivers is I think the eighth is passing around the
Mm,
corner.
Yes,
So
yes.
so anyway, what's the vision? WWF's vision is really no plastic in nature, and not just the oceans, not just the rivers, but also in our agricultural lands because it's already affecting us. That's why it's incumbent upon us, different stakeholders, that we use different instruments, whether it's an economic instrument, whether it's a social instrument, and therefore scientific. We have to really ensure that we manage our waste. And I get back again that we're consuming more than what the planet can produce, and it's more terrible to see that with this consumption um, production issue, we even have more waste.
mm,
So there's no way but for us to work together, as mentioned by Chris, Guys, and Tonette, because at the end of the day, it's already affecting us, our health, our children, our very lives on a daily basis. We're basically eating plastics already at some point in
mm.
time or at one point in time. So, uh, gusto ko yung tagline ni Chris that together possible. And I like to end with that. And I'm very hopeful that with different groups working together, we can address this no matter how complex. Thank you.
Great. So, of course, while the problem is very critical and then very present, it's encouraging to see so many of the active stakeholders come together and agree that we all need to work together to reduce or even eliminate plastic waste in this country and, of course, globally. Thank you very much to Chris, to Kais, to Net, and Joel for your insights and your very candid responses. And thank you very much to everyone for joining us today in this roundtable discussion.